the Elgin Marbles, or the Parthenon sculptures, are a series of wonderful 5th century BCE Greek sculptures that once adorned a temple called the Parthenon on the Acropolis at Athens, and actually one or two pieces from other buildings there on the Acropolis as well. They were produced when Athens itself was at its most powerful in the Greek world. It had an empire that stretched across much of the Greek world, and it was largely from the tribute from that empire that the sculptures and the temple that housed them were built originally. So the Athenians didn't pay for it, but other Greeks did. And they were produced and overseen by a sculptor called Phidias, who was acknowledged as perhaps the greatest sculptor of his day. And the particular sculptures are related to a number of different themes. So there is a continuous frieze that shows a procession that is probably depicting one of the great religious processions of Athens, and that's the particular piece that there's more of that than anything else. That's nowadays split roughly half and half between London and Athens.
Did it have flames back then? Oh, don't worry. No.
So Lord Elgin was the British ambassador to the court at Constantinople, which was at the heart of the Ottoman Empire. And at that time, and for some roughly 350 years before that, what we now call Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire. So Elgin was the ambassador, and he was building a new house for himself. And one of the things he wanted to do was to go to Greece and to take drawings and measurements and casts from some of the great monuments there to assist him with the decoration of this house at Broome Hall in Scotland. And he secured permission to draw. It cost him 5 guineas a day at the time, but he couldn't get permission to make casts and put scaffolding up on the building from the people in Athens. So he asked for permission from the Turkish central government to do that. And they issued him with a document that did allow him to make casts. But in that document, there was a very ambivalent clause that said it decreed that no one should meddle with their scaffolding or their implements or hinder them from taking away any pieces of stone with inscriptions or figures. And Elgin's team, because actually Elgin himself wasn't in Athens for most of the time. He had a team of workers and draftsmen there who were working on his behalf. They, if you like, put the widest possible interpretation on that particular document, and proceeded then to ask the Turkish authorities in Athens whether they could remove stones from the building, and the Turks complied. The big problem with this is that the original document doesn't survive. What we have is an Italian translation of it, which was produced for Elgin's main man in Athens, who was an Italian. He was called Giovanni Battista Lucieri. So the problem that we have with the paperwork is that none of this survives. None of it was perhaps kept or archived. So it's digging back into who was allowed to do exactly what and when is quite a tricky problem for everybody. even in his day, he was hugely controversial. One of his main opponents was Lord Byron, who wrote vitriolic poetry about him and, if you like, the damage that he'd done to the Parthenon in order to remove the marbles. But there were people who supported him as well for, if you like, for, as they saw it, rescuing the sculptures from decay or Turkish vandalism. So he was controversial in his own day.
Okay.
There was great controversy when he brought the marbles home. There was a debate in the House of Commons. A select committee was set up to decide two things, really. Had he acquired these things legally, and were they any good? Were they worth buying from him? And they were satisfied that due legal process had been followed. The government didn't want to acquire stolen goods, obviously. That's debated hotly now, but at the time they were happy with that. And they wanted to know whether these things were of sufficient artistic quality to warrant purchasing.
It needs discussion and it needs a solution. Whether that solution's loaning it or giving it back, I'm not qualified to say.
You can't cancel, you've always got to talk, right? So the meeting shouldn't have been cancelled. It's silly and evasive. It's not going to get rid of the issue.
I personally believe that it should be sent back to Greece.
Yeah, I actually do think they should go back. I think, ultimately that's where they belong. I think this, I heard an argument which said something about, well, we've spent all this taxpayers' money on maintaining them. Well, utter nonsense. I mean, fundamentally, let's get an agreement so that they can be in the right place.